I call this fly the bass candy fly, which, I mean, if you have seen some of my other flies, it's essentially just a bigger version of the perch candy fly, but I'm tying it on a size 6 saber fly dry fly hook, and I'm using a big old bead on it, even though it's a dry fly hook, because I love the shape of it. I use this for a lot of different flies, but you can also use it for tying a bass candy fly. You're going to take your thread. I'm using a yellow 140, and you're going to get it all the way to the back right after the bend of the hook. So a little bit, like kind of halfway before it starts to really bend down. And then you're going to take this awesome material called a pearl core braid in the root beer color, and you're going to tie that on right at the end. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a lighter to kind of burn the tip, and then I'm going to take some of this UV resin, and with this material, the inside is kind of like a thread. So instead of melting, it burns. And I think it just looks a lot better if you use a resin and then cure it with a UV light, because it just has this nice little end on it when you do that. And then at the same time, it'll make it like, I've caught some fish, and later in this video I'll show you, sometimes the fish will bite that and it comes off, but it just kind of keeps the braid material together. You want it to be about the length of the shank of the hook, and you're going to tie in with 1 or 2 loose wraps at first, and then you're going to tighten it. Once you know that it's nice and snug, you can snip it off and then really tie in the rest of what's left. I'm going to use this Orvis Ice golden brown dubbing that I'm almost out of. I love this stuff. I use it for so many different flies. And I'm going to, instead of using like a wax or anything special on the thread, I'm just going to make sure I rotate it in one direction only. And I'm not doing anything special other than that. And you're going to pinch it on as you need it. And eventually you're just going to work your way up the hook until you get to the bead, so that you've got a base of this golden, fuzzy looking material that's going to kind of look like the body of whatever this is supposed to look like. I think it sometimes looks like a little fish, but I guess it mostly looks like a worm. But it's kind of up for debate, the action of it. I catch most fish on this fly after it's hit like 1001, 1002, as it's falling. Here's the saddle hackle that I'm going to tie in. And what I do is I try to squeeze it in between the hook and the bead, and I tie it in really nice and tight. And then you're going to walk the line or the thread back to the back of the hook, and you just start spiraling the saddle hackle back. Then you're going to capture it at the back of the hook. And the key here, I mean, if you've ever done a woolly bugger, which is kind of what this fly is a lot like, you're going to want to walk. Usually you'd have like wire to do this, but I'm just using thread to have one less ingredient. You could put wire in it to give it a little extra flash if you wanted, but I'm going to try and wind the thread back up with each wrap so that it's not keeping any of the fibers of that feather and messing it up. And I think I did a pretty good job of it here. Then I'm going to tie it. I'm going to do a couple of wraps to try and push the fibers backwards so that they're kind of going the same direction as the way the fly would be going in the water. And then I like to end by wrapping up some more of that ice dubbing in that golden brown color, which will also help push back the fibers of the feather to make sure that it's kind of going in that direction. And I think it also just looks good to have that little golden bit right there instead of just a bunch of scraggly feathers. Finish it off with a little bit of glue, and you should be getting close to being done. It's not the most beautiful fly in the world, but it really produces. So stay tuned, and I'll be able to show you some footage of myself catching different bass and perch in different bodies of water at different times of year. Here's some footage from Ladybird Lake in springtime here in Austin, Texas. I'm using a 5-weight rod with floating line, and I'm casting about really 10 feet away from the bank because there's so many weeds. And I just let it sink, and then I strip a little bit, and that's when I hook into this tiny little bass. I'm mainly using this clip because I need more examples of fish that I've caught with this fly. That's kind of the MO I'm going for when I make these videos of little flies that I'm tying, is I like to include some kind of footage, but this is fish number 1. This is more footage on Lady Bird Lake, but I'm farther up the lake underneath the bat bridge. I like to fish there a lot because of the structure and all the bat poop falling into the water. I just feel like it's really stinky, but it makes for some action. And I hooked into this a bass that's pretty big for a small Tenkara rod, but that's what I was using to try and just get any action. And I hooked into this bass. I'd forgotten my GoPro, but here I am rotating my phone to try and get some footage of it. But a nice bass underneath the bridge on this fly, and I was just fishing it really slowly until I pretty much got crushed by that bass. Part of the tail fell off from the struggle, but it lasted quite a while. It was a fun little fight. This last footage is actually on Lake Cherokee in East Texas, just outside of Longview. This is at my in-laws' house. I was just fishing the docks, and again, this fly, it's pretty dynamic. I feel like it would catch fish pretty much anywhere. If you like the tie, if you think you could make it better, if you have any recommendations, please leave a comment and subscribe. Thanks for watching.